afternoon to you all. First of all, good afternoon to Professora Helena Pereira and to Professor Teresa Ferreira. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all of you that are here with us today, and to all of the students and researchers, etc., that are following us at home by streaming. So the idea for this masterclass started in the scope of two classes. One, it's called the seminar for the PhD of students that are taking the PhD in forestry here in ISA, and the other course, it's the one that it's called the scientific motivation seminars. The idea was to take advantage of our close relationship with the president of FCT and also the teacher here at ISA, to hear about science in Portugal, to hear about the career in science here in Portugal, and to give the opportunity to our students to hear what she has to tell us about those topics. So to speak a little, to have a little bit of a seminar around motivation on the scientific work that students are developing. After this, we tried to maximize and to optimize all of the resources that were developed, that were taken as resources for ISA, our time, the time of the people that were here with us today. And for that reason, we open up the class that we called MasterClass. We open it to other students. So we made the communication of the class inside ISA to have other people, other professors, other researchers here with us today. After doing this, and yesterday at a little bit of at the end, 24 hours before, there was this interest around the event that motivated us to pass it by streaming. And for that reason, I would like to appreciate the work of Marcy and the communication, the people that work on the communication for ISA. So I'd like to appreciate that all of you are here today, and I would like to pass to Professor Teresa Ferreira, that's the president of Conselho Científico, the Science Council of ISA, before passing for Professor Helena Pereira. Thank you very much for being here.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So it is with great pleasure that Instituto Superior de Agronomia, School of Agriculture, is hosting the last masterclass of Professor Helena Pereira. What we have, what we demand to academic people, to teachers, to professors, is nothing less than being super persons. I would say Superman, but with all the gender problems these days, Superwoman, Mighty Woman, Super Person. So we are asked to give very good classes, or at least interactive classes with students in a way that students remember us, and especially get the personality, the taste for questioning and for finding new items of research and knowledge, and for this it's very important that we have teachers that also research and have the ability to do so. Professor Helena Pereira was one of such persons. She has manifold of students that have learned, that have researched, that have followed her supervision in the sense of excellent mindset, careers, and futures for each single one of them, and collectively all of them. Then the career also asked us to be super researchers, be people that published everything everywhere, well known, with a lot of metrics, a lot of renowned outputs throughout all the spheres of knowledge in the world. And this is difficult too, because it means that we need projects, we need funding, we need people to work on the project, we need to find ways to propose new ideas. Each time new ideas are more difficult to propose. This is a true challenge. No? And again, in this situation, Professor Helena Pereira has done so exceedingly throughout her career, being a career with international dimension, with a projection in all types of projects, international, more innovative, more applied, less applied, whatever, projects of research that she has for many years and since very early times conducted with all the students. Then we are asked to outreach. We are asked to produce things that are useful to society, and that society discovers they are useful, because one thing is to produce something that is useful, the other thing is to make it go into the society and see how this is important, see how this is going to be helpful for you. The second part is more difficult than the first one. We all know that we are working in very important things, but are they really applicable in society? And so this transmission of knowledge, this capacity to outreach and to put novel ideas and novel strategic concepts onto the society and societal use is one of the things we are asked to, and it's incredibly difficult. And again, Helena Pereira has done so in many ways, either through patents or through the connection she has with many enterprises and many companies that develop the products and the areas of expertise that I'm sure in the next half an hour she will show she has. And then a very important, the final fourth very important aspect that we are asked to do is management. Management of research groups, management of areas of knowledge, management of institutions, management of councils, management of science. Helena Pereira has exceedingly done so in all these kinds of management, from universities to research groups. Maybe the more important are even the research groups, because they mean a close contact with people and supervision that orientates, guides these young people that you are, these young people towards situations of exceedance of their own skills. So Helena Pereira has made really the figure of the superwoman in a sense. It's well, I know it's very difficult what they ask us. Many of us do not reach it, but she has done so. And so we are very proud to have this last lesson. This last lesson means the coronation, the tip of the iceberg of a career for a teacher, for a professor. And in this noble room where agriculture of 100 years ago is remembered, I would like to have an amphitheater also very modern for 100 years after, but this one is also very nice. In this very nice room where history of agriculture is remembered, we are very proud to ask her to give her last lesson, and pleased that she can share with us this last way to the last moment of teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I always feel embarrassed when they are speaking of me. I have done many of the things Teresa said, and I have done them very willingly and with pleasure, because I like everything. So I will give this masterclass. I will go up in front. I will speak not seated, and it's not how I like. So let's move forward. Okay, so it is really with pleasure that I am here. I like very much to teach. So to be in front of students, be them doctoral students or first-year students, I like all these lessons. So it is a pleasure to be here with you, with the students, but also with many colleagues. And I know that other colleagues are following us in streaming. So hello to everyone and thank you for having invited me. This is a happy coincidence because I have been acting as president of the funding agency for science in Portugal. It's called FCT. And this role of direction has a certain duration. And this mandate, as we call it, terminates today. So this is the last act that I am doing as president of FCT. So it is really a coincidence. And it is a so happy coincidence that I am speaking of what FCT has done and what I have done also a little bit along this period. So it's really a good occasion and I'm very happy about it. I am talking about the science and technology in Portugal and about the impact of funding on the system, on the institutions, on the researchers, on projects. We are here in very informal environment, so please feel free to interrupt me if something you don't understand something. Feel free to raise your hand and ask something. And of course, at the end, we will have a period for interaction between you and me. But in the middle, if you find that something is unclear, please ask. Well, we know that, I think all of us nowadays know that knowledge is important for the development of societies. And development in a broad sense, development in terms of economy, in terms of the social texture, in terms of culture. So all these aspects are important to have countries, regions, cities, universities that are modern, developed, and that make a useful contribution to humankind. So this means that nowadays most countries have a policy for the development of science and technology, which are the basis for creating knowledge. And of course, it is not only creating knowledge that is important, it is also important to apply the knowledge, to put the knowledge we have gained into applications that are taken by the society, by the different parts of the society. Of course, to do that, to do science, to do technology, and afterwards to do innovation, you need usually funding. That costs money, of course. So that means that a country has or should have a policy of creating knowledge, of fostering science and technology and innovation, but should also have a policy for the funding of that. Okay, so what happens in Portugal? And also, it is also a coincidence that our funding agency in Portugal, which is the Fundação para a Ciência e a Tecnologia, so our FCT, makes this year 25 years of age. So we are in this year celebrating 25 years of activity of FCT, and the activity of FCT is of funding science and thereby fostering knowledge. Well, so we are having many sessions, sort of conferences and workshops along the year. We have done already 7 sessions. And in each of these sessions, we are talking about some aspect of science. Some of the slides I am using here today are slides that have been presented in these sessions. And let's compare what happened 25 years ago and what exists now. Well, 25 years ago, it was a clear start of a policy of science in the country. So in 97, there was for the first time a Ministry of Science and Technology. Before that, we did not have a Ministry of Science. So it started with that, and we started with a decree that set which were the institutions that were performing research, creating science. And at the top, there were the state laboratories, Laboratories do Estado in Portuguese, and then 2 other broad designations said that other public and other private institutions that do research. And already at that time, there was a specification when they talked about the other, they gave an example. And the example that was given at that time was the associate laboratories, Laboratories Associados. That notion, that concept existed from the beginning. And they created FCT, the funding agency. And they created also another institution, which was called FCCN, Fundação para a Computação Científica Nacional, which dealt with computing. Okay, so that was 25 years ago. So at that time, Portugal established the basis for a system that created knowledge and funded that creation of knowledge. The system continued, evolved a long time, and now in the present time, what do you have? We have a ministry that is called Science, Technology, and Higher Education. We have a decree law, which we called, the nickname of it is Law of Science, that establishes which are the institutions within the system. They are the research units. They are the state laboratories, the associate laboratories, research infrastructures, also collaborative laboratories, collab, technology and innovation centers, and networks and consortia. So this is what is now established in Portugal as the scope of our science system. And another important thing is that body, that computing, that foundation for computing was integrated into FCT. So nowadays, what we have is just FCT. So the part of the computing is computing, and it's not only computing, it's computing, networking, communications, and so on, is within FCT. So these networks that we have, for instance, EduRoam, or the platforms that we're using for our classes and video and all of these things, or the digital courses, they are supported by this unit within FCT. So when we have a science system, we also always have to establish what are the principles underlying it. So the principles of doing science and the principles for the institutions that do research. And looking at the legal documents 25 years ago and now, we can see that Of course, the words changed something, but in essence, they remain the same. And what are the main points that govern science in Portugal and have governed during these 25 years science in Portugal? Is that research has freedom, that at the same time it has responsibility, and that we have to apply in science a code of good practices. That has remained a long time as the framework for research. Then the principles for the institutions, for the R&D institutions, also remain the same a long time. They should have an independent evaluation. They should do research, of course, but they should also have a role in disseminating and diffusing the results of science and the culture and the scientific culture. Mobility of human resources was also stressed. Management flexibility, resource optimization, formation. So the question of advanced formation of human resources was always there. The planning, mistake there, planning by objectives, and the need for interinstitutional cooperation. So these have been, along these 25 years, the underlying principles of our system, and they are still okay. And it would be good that everyone would apply all of them. So, but the system did not remain the same during these 25 years. The system had a lot of dynamics along these 25 years in a good sense. So it has growth, it had a structural change, and a long time it was appreciated and had a national recognition of its quality. And also it became more internationally active. So these were the four main points of evolution of the system along these 25 years. Let me show you some numbers. So one very important figure is always how much we spend in research. And we can say very clearly that along these years, we increased significantly the investment in science. And one way of measuring the investment in science, of course, we can measure it in millions of euros, for instance, but a good indicator is to have the percentage of our GDP applied, PV's GDP, that's Portuguese, applied to science. And in 97, we had only 0.6% of the Portuguese GDP was applied in science. This was very small. And we had the investment in science can be in different sectors, can be in universities, in research centers, in state laboratories, and also in the private sector, in companies. And at that time, 22% of the investment in science was done in private companies. Okay, that changed quite dramatically a long time. The last figures we have complete are for 2020, and the absolute amount increased, but more importantly, the percentage of the investment in terms of GDP increased very much, 3 times. So now we have 1.62% of GDP is applied to science. That's better, of course. we were very happy with that figure. We, Portugal, very happy with that figure, but still, that is not enough. The countries we wish to compare with, which are the Nordic countries and some of the Central European countries, have a much higher investment in terms of GDP allocated to science. And Portugal has an ambitious goal that in 7 years, in 2030, we will apply 3% of our GDP in science. That's very, very ambitious. And it is also the target for the European Union. So we align with the European Union in that 3% of GDP for science. Well, but that's not only that occurred during this period. There was also a structural change in where the investment in science was made. You notice that in 25 years ago, only 22% of the investment in science was done in private companies. Nowadays, more than half is done in private companies, in companies, industries, and so on. So 57%, that's a lot. And so the idea that we have, in many cases, in our academic world, in our academic scientific world, that most of the research is done here, not true. So more than half of the investment in science is done in private companies. So that means that we have to take that into account, and that changes a lot. Yes? Total investment, irrelevant of who is applying. Can be the state, can be European money, can be private money, everything. So this is total investment. Yeah, but this is something that sometimes we do not recognize as one important point in our science system, is that most of the investment is done within the private sector. Okay. We also, of course, with the increase of investment, we increased also one important aspect, which is the number of researchers. The number of researchers calculated as full-time equivalent. FTE means full-time equivalent. FTE in years, FTE, equivalent integral. We had increased a lot the number of researchers. So we had in 1999, which is the first year for which we have this indicator, we had 15,000 FTE researchers, and in 2020 we had 53,000. So this is really quite a difference. We had also, of course, with the change of the investment in the different sectors, of course, the researchers also have a change in their employers. So 41% of the researchers are employed by the private sector. Okay, the change is not only at that level. One level is related to the state laboratories. The state laboratories were 25 years ago the main piece of institutional component of the system. And we had at the time 13 state laboratories. They had 3,000, almost 3,500 researchers. Now we have only 7 state laboratories, and the number of researchers decreased significantly. They are 1,600 now. This is quite a change that the system should take into account when doing analysis on science. These are the names the names of the state laboratories that are now active. For instance, in the areas of this institute, we have the Instituto Nacional de Investigação Agrária e Veterinária, INIAV, of course, and also Instituto Português do Mar e da Atmosfera, also some aspects are important, and so on. Then another change is the importance of the research units. Research units are structures research structures that were built in Portugal from a bottom-up approach. It was not the state laboratories, for instance, are institutions. They come from ministry, they are hierarchic structures, well-defined, and so on. The research units are bottom-up approaches that agglomerate researchers that want to do research in a voluntary, let's say, voluntary way. And in 1999, we had 10,000 researchers grouped in research units. In 22, so now we have a total of 312 research units. You can imagine this is a huge number for a small country like Portugal. We have other structures, also research bottom-up structures, which are called the associate laboratories, 40, and we have 56 research infrastructures. And they group in total about 30,000 researchers. So this is also a dramatic change of the panorama of where the researchers are doing their research, which is the institutional framework where they are working. By the way, I or FCT is very proud to have made a systematic work of compiling in a structured way, compiling this information. And we published in our site. If you look at our page in the internet, you will see under the publications section, you will see that we have these publications, and especially this atlas of research units compiles the 312 research units by research area with their small description, area of activity, and so on. And the first chapter, where the system is explained, the overall system is explained, more or less what I am talking here. The system is explained, and also an appraisal of the evolution of the research units. We made the same for the associate laboratories and the same for the infrastructures. Okay, during this time, we also innovated in institutional terms with what we called the collaborative laboratories, CoLab. It's the nickname that we use. And these CoLabs are institutions that are a mix of research, of knowledge creation, of applied knowledge creation, of transfer of the results of researcher, and of the valorization of the results. So they have to have a mix of research entities, for instance, research units, together with components, that entities that do transfer of knowledge, and then stakeholders that use the knowledge, for instance, industries or other entities. This is something new for Portugal that did not exist, but that existed in other countries, that existed and exists. nowadays. It exists, for instance, in Germany, which is maybe the oldest system, with what is called the Fraunhofer Institutes. It exists also in the United Kingdom with catapult initiatives, and in other countries also, with some differences. But these two that I mentioned are very, very similar to our collabs. Well, again, what we do, as we always do, is that we open up to the society the application to these new ideas. So we make up a code for whatever, for instance, the collapse or project or whatever. And it is the scientific and academic and the society in general that applies to these goals. And collabs, for collabs, we did that also, and we have now, we did that since 4 years ago, I think. And we have now 41 collabs working in different areas with different entities, of course. And one thing that is interesting about collabs is that they have to have this aspect I told you. They have to do research. They have to do research that is applied research. They have to have transfer of the results of that research, and then they have to have entities that will apply the results. And the idea is that when they are working, they will have their financial status would be to have 3/3. 1/3 will be a funding from the state. 1/3 would be from competitive calls that they will have success. And the other third will be by selling products or services and so on. So on a more or less a commercial basis. So this is the idea underlying collabs. As I told you, they are still in the beginning. So they are still in the startup phase. They will be evaluated after 5 years. And those, we hope many of them will have succeeded and are doing this. Maybe some of them will not succeed and they will be finished. But that is really an innovation in our system done so 4 years ago. So we have an animation, we don't use animation. Okay. Oh, no. Okay. So the system nowadays, what I have told is like that. We have research units, we have associate laboratories, we have infrastructures, we have collabs, we have state laboratories, we have these interface centers, and we have, of course, the private sector enterprises. And you see that they are mixing a bit. And they are mixing because there are connections between these things, especially connections related to the researchers. For instance, the researchers that are working in research units are almost all of them researchers that are working in associate laboratories. And the infrastructures, most of the researchers working in infrastructures are also the same that are working in research units. Then the collabs have a mix of these things. They have persons from state laboratories, persons from research units, and so on and so on. So you see that there is an interconnection between all these institutions. That is good in a way, that also has some disadvantages in another way. That sometimes you don't know what is what. Okay. Okay. So this means that we always, when we do this analysis, we always think, of course, the past is very nice to see how the evolution went. It is very good to have that background. It's necessary to have that background. But with that knowledge, we always think what should come afterwards. What have we learned from the previous years? And here in this slide, there are some reflections of what we think we should pay attention to in the future. For instance, maybe we should have a better definition and personality of the institutions that are within the system. You know, mixing of things. Maybe we should have that more defined. Then there is a very strong connection between higher education, universities and polytechnics, and research. So a lot of research is done in universities and in polytechnics. So this connection between these two components should be taken into account and seriously thought of. And we have to have a system that is differentiated. We don't want to have things that exist, but they are doing the same things. So we should clearly differentiate the targets, the mechanisms, the strategy, and so on. Responsibility and autonomy are incredibly important, and they should be really valued also in the future. The accounting. Many of these institutions are run with public money. And that means that this is money from all of us. That means that we should give information to the taxpayers of what we are doing with their money. So the accounting to the society is an incredible important aspect. There's a mistake that I told you that this connection between higher education and research is important. So that means that maybe we should pay attention and maybe redefine the statutes for higher education and research. Estatuto da carreira docente universitária, o Estatuto da carreira docente politécnica, o Estatuto da carreira de investigação. And professional paths of the persons within the system, the researchers, but not only the researchers, everyone. Their professional path is important, and we should have flexibility. We have societies that are very dynamic, that change a lot. So our system, our research system, should also account for that change and allow flexibility in the research and the professional paths of the people within the system. So, okay, to that side, to the left side, also thinking of what we have seen in the previous slides, we cannot forget that most of the research nowadays is done in the private sector, in enterprises. So that has to be taken into account on the reasoning, on the full reasoning of the science system in the country. Also, state laboratories. We have seen how the state laboratories have decreased. The state laboratories are incredibly important components of our system. They support the policies of the country in their different areas, and they guarantee the sustainability of the information, of the knowledge in their areas. So again, they should be clearly taken into account and be redefined. And funding, the funding, what does that mean? That means that we should have a programming for research, a programming that is not annual. Nowadays, the funding of the science from the side of the funding agency is annual. So FCT receives its budget each year. And of course, the research is not done yearly. We have projects that last 3-4 years. We have researchers' contracts that last 6 years. We have PhD scholarships that last 4 years. So everything is pluriannual. And yet, the agency gets only 1 year budget. So it is a fact, a strange thing that FCT is taking decisions of funding, of multi-annual funding, when in fact FCT does not know what happens next year or after next year. So there should be a multi-annual funding program also for the agency. And of course, everyone, including the international organizations, for instance, the OECD, that have analyzed Portugal and our system, all of them have said that FCT, the funding agency, should have more autonomy, of course, with this multi-annual programming, so that would mean that the statutes of FCT should be also revised and redefined. Okay, so let's stop for 5 minutes here because I'm showing you now a couple of slides with a lot of numbers and so on. So let's stop here a little bit and ask you, do you have questions about that? Have you an idea that our systems or our system was like that? So feel free to say anything. You can, of course, speak in Portuguese, of course. Ask in Portuguese. Okay, because of the recording and streaming, yeah.
Hello. So my question is, we are discussing a problem that is already known as OECD reports, and so is expected any change those statutes in the next years? So how is that situation for the multi-year budget of FCT?
If it depended on FCT, I would say yes, but it does not depend on FCT. So that is, of course, a political decision that will depend, of course, of the Minister of Science, and not only of the Minister of Science, of the Minister of Finances, the Minister of Finance, and all the other ministers. So that is really a political issue that I could say, I hope yes, but no, it is not foreseen that at least in the next, I would say, 2 years, 3 years, that will change. But I am optimist that it will change because it makes no sense in the way it is now. So I think that our society now and our research system is mature enough to reivindicate this change. So, but it is not easy. So it requires at least 2 years of preparation and so on, and discussions and so on.
I'll pick up this last answer and the question to ask the same thing about the status of higher education and research.
Mm-hmm. The answer is the same, more or less. Again, it does not depend a lot, in this case, not at all on FCT. It does not depend on a single institution. It has to have a political agreement on that. I think that now the general opinion is that a revision of the statutes is necessary, and that will take place. in the next future? 2 years. It is a lot of discussions with the unions, with associations, with the institutions. So that takes time because everyone has different opinions, of course. So it has to be discussed a lot and to try to establish consensus and agreements and so on. That takes time. But I would say that statutes, there I am more sure, statutes will be revised in the next maybe 2 years. The way they will be revised is still open because there are very different possibilities. As it is now, we can revise the statutes for universities, the statutes for polytechnics, the statutes for research careers, so separate. Or you can group them. That is open. Pros and cons for everything. Of course, I have my own opinion, but that does not matter now. Yeah. But it is necessary that involved parties. So, for instance, the researchers, the universities, the polytechnics, the schools, the research units, and all of them, if they think, and I think they think, if they think this is necessary, they should say that loud and clear. Yeah.
I have a question. I hope a lot of discussion comes up in the future to find a better solution. Well, about this graph, I would like to ask you, those are totals, right? And how much of those totals come from PhD students, postdocs, and precarious?
Okay, we are already starting on that, no problem. So this is, I am going to show you now some slides with different indicators. And this one is to show how the outputs, our science outputs increased in time. So here, these are number of publications. So from the Web of Science, published with at least one author from Portugal. And of course, you see that it increased. It is now, in comparison with other countries, we have a good record. We don't know what you asked. So how many of these publications were involved, for instance, PhD students or other things, That calls attention to something that I am making a bit of marketing of now, is that we have a lot of information that needs to be studied and to be analyzed. For instance, this thing you told about. So that means that we are, all of the public institutions that have data on science, namely FCT, is one of the cases, a lot of studies can be done on that to show the impact of programs, of things. And for instance, what you asked is very, very important. How much of these publications are, or let's phrase it other way, how much a PhD student contributes to a publication? That is very relevant. And we should have that information. We don't have it now. It depends. Some have, some have not. For instance, here at the school, at the research centers, I don't think we have that information. We could have that because we are a small world. That would not be very difficult to do that. But still, we have not done that. So if anyone is interested in doing this sort of works, this or other analysis, please come forward. Yes, I would say, for instance, I don't know, I cannot say anything about the general panorama of the school, but I can say about my own area, my own research area, research group. There, yes, the percentage of papers that have contribution of PhD students is very high. So, any other questions before it's a sort of a break before continue? Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 This is an important aspect. And this is something that we should also study and analyze, in fact, in all the institutions. How successful are they in the coming together of the different actors? Yeah. And collabs especially because they have different types of actors. We still do not have, as I told you, they will be analyzed, evaluated after 5 years. Still, they are the oldest ones, they are 3 years old. So they are not yet there. So we don't know yet from an independent external evaluation, we don't know. But you asked about my feeling. And my feeling is that it depends. It depends. We have collabs that are working, in my opinion, very well with a strong collaboration and effective collaboration between the different entities, and that they know exactly what are their objectives and targets. There are some like that. And there are some collabs that do not know what are their strategic objectives, and therefore they don't cooperate very well. They don't do very well their work. That also exists. But as I told you, it's still too soon. Too soon. We have to give way. There is an accompanying structure of the collabs, an international group who is accompanying collabs and is giving them some advice. So in 5 years' time, or when they finish the 5 years, we'll know better. But yes, that is a very, very relevant question. So let's continue with the next slide. Okay, so how much does the state invest in science? And more important, and that's what I want to call your attention, is how much is the funding of FCT important? So what is the share of this funding agency in the overall state investment in research? So FCT investments, they are the green, the red squares. So you see that it is rather stable, more or less, rather stable. Around, well, not half, but near half, near half. And the state investment changes, of course. So that means, what does that mean, state investment? Of course, state is putting money into research. For instance, the state laboratories, they are paid by the state. The the professors at university, the time they allocate to science, they are paid by the state. So the funding directly from FCT represents nearly half of the total amount, which is a lot, which is very important in the system. So what I intend to show you with this slide is that the funding from a funding agency, a targeted science funding agency, is important for the system because it represents about half. Let's call it half for simplicity. And now, part of this slide is in Portuguese. I will translate it when I talk. I could not change it because it was locked, the figure. So this funding of FCT, where are we putting it? In which area of activity are we putting it? So when we have, for instance, the blue, so the blue color are related to people, to human resources. That is the combination of scholarships, for instance, PhD scholarships, and research contracts for researchers. So what we call the scientific employment, emprego científico in Portuguese. Then the red color are the funding that goes to infrastructures and research units. The green are the projects, the R&D projects. Then the violet are the international relations, international programs. And then the other blue is our other things. So what does this mean? This means that in total, it changed a little bit along time, but not very much, in fact. And what does it show? That people, so scholarships and scientific employment are the most important share of the investment. Then the institutions are also important. The projects also more or less the same amount or the same proportion as institutions. And then the other ones have smaller proportions. So these people are important. Of course, they are important. They are one very strong backbone of the system. Without people, the system would not work, to do nothing. Well, let's analyze a little bit in more detail how we separate this funding of people. And here we have a clear difference a long time. In the past, when the system was still very young and not very mature, we had scholarships for master students. You see the violet thing in the beginning that stopped by 2006 were scholarships for master students. So at the time, our system was still very young, and we needed to foster master students. That stopped now. So what increased the PhD scholarships. So it is the red color over there. It increased. But another thing decreased. It was the postdoc scholarships. We had an increase, it's the green color. We started with the postdoc scholarships in the 25 years ago with a small proportion. It was increasing steadily, and it increased a lot in the years of 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on. So we had a lot of people at that time, with postdoc scholarships. Postdoc, as the name says, are people who have already a doctorate and are working in research with a postdoc scholarship. And that is good, of course, if it is a period, a short period after the doctorate, but maybe it is not so good if it extends over time. And that is what happened in Portugal, not only in Portugal, in every country. So that means that researchers started to say, with reason, that they had no stability in their contracts because they have only a scholarship, and they should have a research contract. And that was everyone agreed on that, I think, and that was politically accepted and changed, and it started more in the. It started already at a small scale. Started in 2008 with some small programs with contracts. Those that were working here at that time know the names: Programa Ciência, Programa IEF. But they were small programs. And then we had a lot of increase in that number by the years 2019, 20, 21, and so on. So this is a clear change that the PhD scholarships disappear. They are disappearing. We have only a few that still are finishing their program, very few, and increased research contracts for PhDs. So this is a structural, a very significant structural change in our system. By the way, the contracts are 6 years contracts, so FCT funds 6 years contracts. The contracts are established by the researcher with their organization, their school, their center, where they are working. So FCT assumes the role of funding agency, but not as contracting agency. And it is this philosophy that we have adopted some years ago and is going on, is that we are sharing responsibility with the system. So FCT funds, the system contracts. Okay, so this is a theme that interests a lot of people because many persons in our system are within these research contracts. And these research contracts come, as I told you, from different programs. It started with program Ciência. We had also a small, not very successful program for the researchers who worked abroad, which was called the Welcome program. We had the program Investigador FCT, yeah. But they were small programs. So they are the blue, the red, and the green over there. And then they are finishing. They started earlier, they are now finishing. And now what we have is what we call the employment, scientific employment contracts established either by what we call a program of individual application or institutional application. And we have also contracts that we have, the Portuguese people know that very well. Which we call norma transitória, which also gave contracts to a lot of people. So you see how these numbers increased a long time. Again, I tell you, they are 6 years contracts. So remember what I told you, that FCT only has budget for 1 year. So you see how stressing it is for the agency to establish these 6 years contracts without knowing what budget it will have next year. So I mean, the stress is not only on the researchers, it's also on the funding agency. Okay, another aspect that you wanted me to talk about was about projects. Well, projects, sorry, I'm having a glass of water. Okay, so projects are, of course, also an important tool for research. So we have ideas, we want to pursue some ideas. Of course, you are within a research organization, for instance, a research unit. So the research unit receives money for doing research, but sometimes you need money to do specific, to pursue specific ideas and specific projects. So the funding of projects is, of course, also an important aspect for science. Well, we had until very recently, we had some instability in the system. What an instability is that we had 1 year where FCT opened a call for projects, and then next year it did not open. Maybe next year not again. Then it opened again. So it was not. We did not know on what to count. So everyone, the researchers, everyone was saying that we should have a stability in the funding. We should know when the applications were when the calls were open, and if possible, every year. So that was the hope that scientific community had. And in fact, FCT agreed, of course. I think we all agreed on that. And since 2019, FCT established a time plan for calls, which has been in place since 3 years ago. And so in that time plan, we know when the call for PhD scholarships opens, when the call for the research contracts opens, and so on. For projects opens, and for project it is an every year project. So the researchers should know that every year there will be a call for projects, as well as for PhD students, as well as for research contracts. Okay, so this is an important point that is already in place. So you see that the projects, of course, when you have a call and an application, then it takes some time to be evaluated, some time to have a contract, to have the contract, and then you start work. So you see that it started, in fact, in 2019, but the effect is only in 2020 that it started, and it's increasing. So for instance, now FCT is in the process of evaluating 3 programs. 1 program for the PhD scholarships. It is under evaluation. The results will be known in July. There is a call for the research contracts, SEC individual, for those who know the name. It is under evaluation. The results will be known in July. There is a call for projects, which is also underway. The results will be known in July also. So that's stable. The system is stable. Okay. One thing that everyone talks about, namely related to projects, not only to projects, but mostly to projects, is that the funding is too small. When FCT opens a call, if you look at the I don't know the name in English, the visa de abertura, the opening document, you see that we established the dates when you should do the application and what we should do, and also how much money, the total money will be available. So we know from the beginning how much money is available for that call. As everyone does, if you go to the European calls, they also say the same thing. So it's a general practice. And in the last years, we have had for projects in this annual call a total budget of 75 million euros. When I say 75 million euros, it seems a lot. But if you divide that by the amount of each project, it's not so much. So you can fund only some hundreds of projects. And well, there is no more money available, as simple as that. What is the frustration? Is that the candidates apply in large numbers. We have 5,000 applications. And of course, maybe we only get 500 successful applications. So this is, of course, a frustration. Well, this is something that the system is not still optimized from both sides. From the side of the funding agency is that the Minister of Finances of Portugal should give more money to science. And if he gives more money to science, then FCT would have more money and could increase the budget of all things. That's from the side of the government. Then from the side of the researchers, maybe they should be more conscious of the framework they are working and clearly see if it is worth being candidates in an applications where maybe the success will not be so strong. But if they are candidates, then make up a very strong application, very good one, to have, of course, more chances of success, of course. So this is what happens with projects. I don't know if you have an idea. So our system works with huge numbers. So I told you in a call, we have 5,000 applications. For those applications, we have to have evaluators, international evaluators. For each application, we have 2 evaluators in different panels divided by scientific areas. So that means, for instance, that FCT, so in general terms, per year, requires about 1,000 international evaluators. We have to invite them, and many of them don't accept because they have other works to do, because they cannot, because the dates that we give them are not adequate, and so on. So that means that to have 1,000 evaluators, maybe we have to invite 5,000. So you can imagine the logistics and the work of this. It's really incredible. So this to show you, I mean, when I was on that side, I was also an applicant. I was making applications in project and everything. And when we are on that side, maybe we have not the knowledge, the conscious, how big and how complex the system is. In a way, it is fascinating to be involved in that. So let's see. Yes, it works. So I think this is the last slide. One thing I want to show you is about how the areas of research in projects have evolved. So the blue is the exact and natural sciences, ciências exatas e naturais. The red is engineering and technology. The green is medical sciences and health. The violet, they are the agrarian and the vet sciences. Blue, this blue, light blue, social sciences, and the orange, humanities and art. Well, what do we see? We see some differences. First of all, I don't know if you see that the blue, the ciências exatas e naturais, exact sciences and natural sciences, they had a very big share in the beginning of the total, and then they decreased their share a long time. Engineering and technologies stayed more or less the same, What increased rather strongly was the medical and health sciences. It's the green. It increased a long time. So nowadays, projects related to medical aspects and health aspects are a strong, have a strong proportion of all projects. You know that sometimes you see in the newspapers claims that from people from social sciences and humanities saying that that Portugal is investing less in their areas. Sometimes you see that, namely in the newspapers. Well, in fact, that's not true. If you see, so the social sciences, the light blue, and then humanities is the orange, so it's the upper thing, and it remains stable a long time. So that means that the proportion related to social and humanities, social science and humanities, is stable. So what we have seen is an increase of medical and health, a decrease of exact and natural sciences. And it is also interesting, that could be also studied and analyzed in detail. But of course, it has to do with the dynamics of the society also. And I think we all agree that having knowledge on medical matters and on health matters is rather important. Okay, and that was really my last slide. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Of course, if you have questions or opinions or whatever you want to discuss, please feel free. English or Portuguese, no matter.
Okay. Hello, my name is Rafael. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. My English it's not very good, but what you told us for me was very important, because I don't understand why the okay, I will talk in Portuguese. It's it's easier for me. As bolsas de mestre atualmente são apenas de um ano e realmente viu-se que têm vindo a diminuir. E a nível pessoal, duram só um ano e as pessoas têm que estar a fazer cursos ao longo desse ano. Eu, a nível pessoal, achei que era uma grande desvalorização para quem está a começar o mundo académico. E o que sempre me foi dito foi a tentativa é tentar contratar mais pessoas, mas a verdade é que não há esse dinheiro. E eu questionava-me, então por que não dão mais dinheiro? Mas a verdade é porque a FCT não tem um valor fixo. Portanto, foi muito importante para mim perceber realmente essa parte e o esforço que têm feito para virem a contratar pessoas, mas que na verdade não têm um financiamento fixo. É isso? Pois é. Ok.
Tem toda a razão. O financiamento da FCT é estabelecido ano a ano. Portanto, nós só sabemos qual é o financiamento deste ano, o chamado orçamento, chama-se orçamento. O orçamento deste ano, sabemos este. Em agosto irá ser discutido globalmente no país, irá ser discutido o orçamento do próximo ano. Portanto, se calhar, só em setembro, talvez, outubro, depende como é que forem as negociações, é que a FCT saberá o que vai ter para 2023. Mas, desde já sabemos, com algum realismo, dado que Portugal não se prevê que encontre petróleo aí no seu país, ou umas minas de diamantes, ou algo assim que dê grande rendimento, não é? Portanto, com algum realismo, sabemos que o orçamento poderá aumentar algum bocadinho, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, não pode ser mais do que isso. E também sabemos que isso não chega para as necessidades da FCT. Portanto, vai obrigar a uma engenharia financeira complicada de doseamento e de escalonamento de compromissos. Não é? Portanto, não é de facto fácil. Não é de facto fácil, não é? Agora, deixe-me dizer-vos uma coisa. Eu falei-vos da corresponsabilidade, quando estava a falar dos contratos dos investigadores, falei da corresponsabilidade com as instituições, não é? Ou seja, que a FCT, como agência financiadora, tem a responsabilidade do financiamento, que as instituições que financia têm a responsabilidade de acolher os investigadores, os programas de investigação, etc., e as instituições de investigação, nomeadamente as unidades de investigação. Ora bem, e nós acreditamos que esta responsabilização é importante, e aumentamos o financiamento das unidades de investigação. Portanto, as unidades de investigação, todas elas, recebem hoje, neste ciclo de financiamento, aquilo é de 4 em 4 anos, recebem hoje mais financiamento do que recebiam no ciclo anterior. E essas unidades podem ter estratégias diferentes, não é? As unidades não são iguais, são até muito diferentes. Temos unidades grandes, unidades pequenas, unidades monotemáticas, unidades mais abrangentes, unidades mais fundamentais, outras mais aplicadas. Há uma grande diversidade e podem ter estratégias diferentes. Nada impede que uma unidade de investigação tenha uma estratégia, por exemplo, de financiar, com o seu financiamento, de financiar jovens no início da carreira académica. Pode ser. Quer dizer, a FCT não levanta problemas. Tem que ser dentro do financiamento da unidade, de acordo com a sua estratégia. Ou financiar bolsas de doutoramento, ou o que quiserem, ou contratos, ou não financiar nenhum. Depende. Estão a ver? Portanto, aí nós acreditamos que as estruturas, portanto, as unidades, para simplificar, os centros de investigação, devem ter a sua estratégia e devem saber como aplicam o seu dinheiro para atingir essa estratégia.
Vou só fazer uma questão, porque, ou seja, por exemplo, eu tive bolsas de mestre. Atualmente, então, sempre me senti muito grata porque tenho uma bolsa financiada pela FCT. Vendo a sua apresentação, ainda vejo mais a sorte que tive. Obrigada. Sempre digo obrigada, mas é verdade. Fiz uma grande festa de agradecimento quando descobri. Mas eu tive tive 2 bolsas de mestre. Uma durou 3 anos, uma durava mais de 1 ano. E atualmente a duração que eu sei é de 1 ano e tem que se fazer cursos não com docente grau, mas se a entidade de acolhimento então pode prolongar esse período.
Não, é mais complicado do que isso. Repare também que está a comparar períodos diferentes. Não é? Aqui há uns anos, o mestrado era uma determinada coisa. O mestrado era uma formação avançada após uma licenciatura de 5 anos. Não é? Era já uma formação avançada na altura. Hoje em dia não é isso. Hoje em dia o segundo ciclo é 2 anos após 3 anos. Para mestre.
Para mestre,
Não é de
sim.
mestrado. Pronto, para
Para
mestre.
sim.
Tá bem.
Desculpem, não me expliquei
Tá bem.
bem.
Eu estava a pensar que
culpa
estava a falar
foi
de bolsas
minha.
de mestrado.
Não é uma bolsa de bem-estar de financiar o mestrado. É quando nós acabamos o nosso mestrado, entramos num projeto de investigação e somos bolseiros com o grau de mestre. E a minha questão é, a mim,
ok.
o que se dizia é agora só podem ser 1 ano, mas se calhar, se a entidade de acolhimento se calhar tem essa capacidade de prolongar mais tempo, não sei.
É assim, obviamente, todas as instituições, quer a FCT, quer as instituições, têm que obedecer a leis que estão acima dela. E um regulamento que saiu, que é o Estatuto de Bolseiro de Investigação, o EBI, não sei como é conhecido, estabelece uma determinada regulamentação. Na sua essência, o que é que diz o EBI? Diz que as bolsas de investigação devem ser para pessoas que estão em formação. Seja formação de mestrado, seja até mais abaixo, até de licenciatura ou de doutoramento, que é o mais normal, ou de formação de cursos não conferentes de grau. Pronto. Mas associado ao conceito de bolsa está um período em que a pessoa está a ser ajudada financeiramente para fazer formação. Está a ver? Pronto. Ora bem, e o que se quer é que isto seja verdade e que não seja uma maneira de estar a contratar pessoas por subterfúgios de bolsas, quando se calhar deviam, se elas são precisas e a instituição as quer, deviam ter contratos. Daí haver uma série de restrições nesse EBI em relação ao prolongamento de contratos de bolsas. Ou seja, mais uma vez, responsabilidade para as instituições. Não é? Está a ver? Portanto, a instituição, se precisa do trabalho de uma determinada pessoa e ela já não está nestas formações de doutoramento ou do que for, se calhar então deve contratá-la. Não é?
Muito obrigada.
Nada. Estava alguém ali. Não tem qualquer quê? Não pode quê? Ganhar? Depende do tipo de contrato, mais uma vez. Não é? Acredito que sim, acredito que não haja possibilidade, sim. Mas reparem uma coisa também. O mundo é muito grande. Não é? O mundo não é só aqui a escola, as escolas, não é só os centros de investigação. Há muitas coisas interessantes no mundo. Até há outras instituições. Olhem, o Escolap, por exemplo. Vai haver, por exemplo, muitos projetos, já ouviram falar do PRR, por exemplo, vai haver muitos projetos que irão começar em breve no PRR, que vão precisar de pessoas. Portanto, o que eu quero dizer é que a pessoa não se pode, ou não deve só, cingir-se, digamos assim, ao seu meio ali à volta. O mundo é muito grande e, portanto, devem, se calhar, encarar o mundo das outras coisas, nas empresas. Eu ouço por aí toda a gente a dizer: não temos pessoas, abrimos concursos, não aparece ninguém em português, tem que ir contratar uns brasileiros. Bom, então, se vocês estão aí, estão a ver. Portanto, o meu conselho é vejam que o mundo é muito grande e pode haver hipóteses muito interessantes fora aqui deste sítio. e nomeadamente para aqueles que estão a fazer doutoramento, for those who are doing PhD degrees, the PhD degree is not a degree for doing research or for being a professor. A PhD is to gain skills, competence, advanced skills and competence to be a good professional in every aspect. So a person with a PhD is able to go to the world for an enterprise, for the administration, for an association, for whatever. And only a few will remain in the research and the academic sector, which is small. So a PhD program nowadays is a program for advanced formation, for being a better professional in the society.
So I have a question. So we spoke about the money. The money is never enough. All of us know that, but well, I don't have any diamonds so to sell. So it's a pity. But my question is after the not on the money, is on the typology of projects. So FCT at a certain period had projects of 1 year. They were like just for the kickoff of one idea. It was like 3 years ago at least. There was this typology of innovation projects or something. Exploratórios. Okay. Then FCT has projects with 3 years. And my question is if there is any agreement then that there should be another typology of projects, for example, follow-up projects that would pick up one existing and financed project from FCT with 3 years and then the follow-up of that. Because the question of starting every time trying to express a new idea, okay, this is new, this was not done before, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's following up something that already started, already had the merits of receiving finance. So what are your considerations about this?
So what is now underway for these last years is that the projects, they have I was going to say typology, but it's not typology because the typology is the same. They have two types. One, which is the normal project with a maximum amount. It's a small project, a maximum amount of 250,000 euros. They are always small projects. Huh? They are not 5 million projects or something like that. So one possibility is to apply for a 250,000 euros project, or to apply to a smaller project of 50,000 euros. And when you apply to this one, to the smaller one, it makes sense that it should be to have a smaller duration and to have only one entity. So the duration is 3 years for the first ones. These smaller ones is 1.5 years, so 18 months. They can be extended 1 year for the longer ones and half a year for the shorter ones. They can be extended. Most of the projects ask for extensions. So this is what we are using. We did in the times of COVID, we did an experience, a successful one, an experience of a very quick projects for response of the pandemic and of the virus of the disease. And we had small projects, 30,000 euros, I think, to be done in 6 months. With a very simplified evaluation process and in a very quick way, because of the urgency of the matter. We wanted to potentiate the knowledge that existed in the system to potentiate that, to put it into practice to the health system. So they had to be in connection with the hospitals or with the health centers or with these things. That was very successful. We did the evaluation, for instance, in 1 month, and we funded these projects. Everyone was very, very happy with that. Many of the projects asked for extension of the months. I think some of them asked for more 6 months and something like that. But they were small things. They were small things. But this is a special thing. This is not. This is a crisis thing. Successful for that, but well, maybe it's not usual thing. The problem is that the regulations that we have to obey do not allow us to have projects with more than 4 years. We don't have also this possibility of a successful project continuing in a next thing. That does not exist. So I don't know. That could be taken into account, for instance, in future calls, but it's speculation what I'm going to say. Could be taken into account that there was a line in the evaluation that would say, if this is a continuation of a previous report, a previous project with very good results, does that have any sense? That could be, but well, at the moment that does not exist.
Hi, hello, can you hear me? Okay, so I'm Sidra, I'm from Pakistan. So I don't know if my question is interested for the national as well as for the international students. As I'm towards the final year of my PhD, I'm basically a Shish4 PhD scholar. So as I'm going towards the final year of my PhD, the worry towards the future prospects in terms of employment is also increasing. So I don't know if it's a recommendation or a question, but what I would like to see is, so we get funding, we do our PhD research, and then what next? Is there any route for the scholars to be associated with FCT in terms of projects, in terms of research, or they are given any priority that after the end of their PhD, they can be still associated if there is any call for the research, any call for the projects, and that would be an asset that they have been FCT scholars and they are given a priority in terms of jobs. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. A person finishes a PhD can apply for some programs, for instance, can apply for these calls for research contracts, employment, scientific employment contracts. It is open, can apply. The competition is high, is very high. So the success rate is maybe 10% or something like that. So there is no priority in anything because one has done a PhD, a funded PhD. Of course, he or she can apply to the things that are open and can be hired, of course, by a project or by a company or by the school, whatever, of course. But there is no priority just because the person had a funded PhD. So it is also always a competitive evaluation with all the other persons in FCT calls. So it is a bit different if you are working within a research unit that may be a little different. The competition maybe is not so high, but international calls, the competition is very high. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Pereira, for this masterclass. I would pick up on your last slide when you have to break down by different scientific domains of the investment done in the different areas, and also taking other citation of yours that this is a lot of public money. So there is investment from money from taxpayers. So we need to explain to the taxpayers what's the money for. Two questions related to that. The first one is, is there a relationship already established between the differences that we have in that slide in the different domains in relation to possible changes that were seen in our economic activity? Where like in some areas we have increased some of these areas and not. Is that relationship established? And the second question would be a practical one. I'm involved in the exercise of developing socioeconomic indicators for research infrastructures. So we need to identify which indicators are best to identify this socioeconomic activity of the outputs of the research, these research researchers. And one of the first things that we get, taking as examples from other research research, is the number of publications. I don't know the meaning of number of public publication, number of scientific publications for a citizen. If I say there are 10 publications from this person or 100 publications from this institution, what does it mean for the citizen? So have you any recommendation of the type of socioeconomic indicators that we can use for this exercise? Thank you.
You have been asking very smart questions and some very difficult ones. Well, first question on how these scientific domains appear. They appear in two ways. One way is because of the number of applications that are submitted in each area. That is, in a way, a sort of response of the society, of the academic society, to that. I mean, if you have a lot of researchers working in engineering and technology, so you have a lot of applications on that area, and so on. So one way of establishing these proportions is by the number of applications of each area, which translates into the importance that in Portugal we have in those areas. Then another possibility is that to have some actions, some calls on specific strategic areas. And we have that also, not maybe so visible and not maybe so important in terms of money as the big call for all scientific domains, but we have that. Let me give two examples. Well, one I told already, these small things for the COVID and for the virus and so on. So this is a specific targeted funding. But another one is related with one important societal problem in Portugal, which is the forest or rural fires. And the FCT opened during 3 consecutive years, opened calls specifically addressing that aspect in different scientific domains. So because it is a complex problem, it deals with ecology, with society, with the firemen, with whatever. So scientific domains could vary, but the problem was the rural and forest fires. This is one example. Another example is, for instance, we are seeing increasingly that society has a problem with the discourse of hate. So you see violence in words, in media, and in actions also. So we had a small call directed for projects related to this discourse of hate. So these are examples that we have done something. They are maybe not so visible because each one is not very big, is small, but they go into the direction you told about. One problem related to that is that Portugal has not clearly defined strategic objectives. We don't have a place to see what are the lines of strategy of Portugal for research. We don't have that. So it is a sort of indirect way to go to these fields. The other thing, I don't know if I can answer the other thing. It is a complex problem. So that means how you evaluate the social impact of your research. It is rather easy to see the scientific impact. You tell the publications, you can have the citations, you can have other indexes related to that. Of course, that's, well, rather easy. But then a paper, has that had any effect on society? Have the results been applied anywhere? So the indicator would not be easy to find. So you have to be specific for certain areas where you can look for real for results in society or in industry, for instance. Sometimes in industry maybe it would be easier. So did that result brought up some innovation in a technology platform? So it is not a straight answer and a single one. I think you have to do a lot of work on that.
So we passed the duration of the class. So the students that are here from the seminar course and from the scientific motivation course, they are here for a longer period than they had in the previous classes. So I would like to close the session. Appreciate again Professor Helena Pereira being here with us today, and appreciate all of the people that were looking at us by Zoom and also by streaming on his YouTube channel. And even more, appreciate the presence of all of you, because I really think that it's a better way to get together. And I hope that many conversations can follow up outside this door. I think that will be a very good result from this today. I'd like to give a round of applause at the end and appreciate again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. It has been really a pleasure to be here with you in presence and those who are in streaming, and to have discussed with you some of your questions that, as I told you, they were all of them very important and interesting, and some of them difficult. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.